Well, hello everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. We can see that the people are just starting to join now. Just over 100 are online at the moment. Welcome to your co-hosts as well. Shiraz is just turning on his video, and your co-hosts are myself, Brett Manley from Melbourne in Australia, Julie from Brisbane in Australia, and Shiraz also from Melbourne in Australia. We're so excited to be here for the second Global Neonatal Club. Whoops, if I can advance the slides the right way. Again, with an amazing representation from all around the world of those registered. There are just over 700 people registered for today, including from countries in Europe, Africa, as you can see there, and of course, around Australia, just over 300 of you registered from Australia. And 37 from Kenya today. So welcome to all of our Kenyan friends. And not only are you all representing lots of different countries, you're also representing a vast multidisciplinary field. So it's wonderful to have not only neonatologists, but especially given the topic of today's journal club, neonatal nurses, researchers, midwives, especially GPs and maternal child health nurses. So welcome to you all. We've got an amazing panel assembled for today that will be joining us later on for their thoughts about the Lancet Commission on Neonatology and also the question and answer session towards the end. We've got pretty much every continent except Antarctica represented in one way or another today, and we'll introduce you to them all in due course, but hopefully you really enjoy their insights today. So now we're going to kick things off, just seeing how many of you have joined, a couple of hundred, that's wonderful. I'm going to hand over to Shiraz now, who's going to take us through the Lancet Child and Adolescent Health Commission on the future of neonatology, and then after that we'll have some interviews with the authors of the commission. So I'm going to step aside for Shiraz now.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us today. I'm very excited to discuss at today's Journal Club the recently published Lancet Child and Adolescent Health Commission on the future of neonatology. I'll start off by just summarizing who the authors were. So this was led by a global team with a steering committee made up of 5 neonatologists. So professors Daniele De Luca, Nina Modi, Peter Davis, who joins us also as a panelist, Satoshi Kasuda, and Steve Abman, and the public health expert, Walter Riccardi. The members of the steering committee predominantly practice in the global north, but they invited commission members to contribute to pre-specified working groups with dedicated aims. And the final commission had 29 members from various professional backgrounds who brought what they say was a balanced representation of sex and diverse representation of geographical region and professional background, as well as age and seniority. So what is a Lancet Commission? It's not a single study as such. It's sort of described as a platform for change, where experts from all around the world from different fields come together to create an evidence-informed roadmap for a critical health problem. And the report is designed really to influence governments, funders, and health systems. So it's not a traditional research paper. It's really better conceptualized as a call to action. And when discussing today's report, we'll also be approaching it from the perspective of where the need is greatest. That's in low and middle income countries, where many of our panelists actually work. Just a second. Right. Okay, here we go. So the drivers for this commission. Well, so why did they write this commission? It came from almost a frustration of this persistent gap in how we develop and fund innovations for newborns. For example, off-licensed drug use. About 90% of the medications that we prescribe don't have sufficient safety or effectiveness data, nor do they have any proper dosage for the specific neonatal population. And the authors describe a severely hindered research and development ecosystem, particularly for drugs and medical devices when compared with other specialties. And some specific areas where real progress is needed are the lack of effective treatments for common morbidities like hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy or birth asphyxia, deficiencies in basic science to understand the specific pathophysiology of diseases in newborns, insufficient funding, with neonatal research receiving far less investment compared to adult diseases, as well as overly stringent regulations that are not really tailored for the unique needs and challenges in conducting neonatal research. And a key trigger for the authors was a pharmaceutical company's decision to halt a trial for a new medication that was being evaluated for bronchopulmonary dysplasia. It really exposed this huge gap in how we develop and fund new technologies for newborns. So how did they do it? So the Commission has brought together about 100 global advisors from all the key stakeholders groups, including fetal medicine specialists, nurses, allied health professionals, as well as regulators and policymakers, scientists, and family representatives and former patients. And they organized them into 5 working groups. And each working group met virtually and worked somewhat independently and submitted a report to the main commissioners. And the final recommendations were sort of derived through what they described as a Quaker-based consensus technique, which included open discussions with active listening and sharing of information and questions, with results eventually attributed to all the participants. And the commissioners and editorial team held 2 plenary meetings to bring everyone together. So what were the working groups? The first 2 were really focused around how we can achieve an efficient research and development pipeline for neonatal medicines, as well as devices. The third was focused around why R&D is actually important for population health and well-being. And then the fourth one was really about how can we promote collaboration in neonatal research and development. And finally, the fifth working group was around focusing a bit more on low and middle income countries. How do we enhance the recognition of its importance as a global necessity? And within this group, they had a couple of surveys from 30 representatives from low and middle income countries and a World Health Organization representative. And the purpose of the 2 surveys were to actually capture the perspectives and challenges from colleagues working in those settings, but also focusing on topics around how to improve the quality of research in low and middle income countries and what the key barriers were on the ground. So what was the main message here? The commissioners really described that the ecosystem for innovation is broken. The things we need from medicines to better devices are not being developed quickly enough. And this is not just about saving lives, it's going beyond that to giving these babies the best possible start to a long life, because the health of the babies today really determines the health of society tomorrow. And around that, the vision of this commission is for neonatology to be a specialty that delivers equitable, improved healthcare for all neonates worldwide, founded on a strong scientific knowledge base created by high medical quality research. And to achieve this, it proposes a renewed focus on science and research that's built on 3 foundational pillars. First, fostering innovation in drugs and medical devices. Second, ensuring that we have the necessary resources, financial, human, technical. And third, strengthening partnerships amongst all these different stakeholders. So how do we actually get there? Well, the commissioners provide this roadmap outlining clear recommendations for different stakeholder groups. This figure shows a hub and spoke wheel illustrating the interconnectedness of each stakeholder group, illustrating how they need to work together. And because each problem can really be addressed in different ways by various stakeholders, with the central role of neonatologists as the medical leaders. So specifically for regulatory bodies and ethics committees, their message here is to recognize that newborns have a right to evidence-based care. The report urges them to harmonize regulations globally and create more flexible consent models that makes it easier to conduct neonatal research. They also call for a shift in the mindset from one that regulators have historically had, which is purely about protecting participants from the potential risks of research, shifting that mindset towards one that actually considers the risks of not being in research, the risks of inaction, that is, maintaining the status quo and perpetuating the use of unstudied interventions, which has its own risks, of course, and creating administrative barriers to emerging drugs and innovations. For clinicians and researchers, the report urges us to move out of our silos, calling for us to collaborate with a broad range of experts, engineers, biologists, data scientists, bringing in big data and AI. It calls for a formal recognition of neonatology as a global specialty to encourage training, both in research as well as in broader career paths. For governments and universities, they want sound economic investment. They argue very well that investing in newborn health now will lead to a healthier, more productive society in the long run. So they're urged to commit to more resources for neonatal R&D and to apply health technology assessments specifically more widely. And for industry patients and global action, they have specific messages, to simplify the internal processes in industry and support this sort of foundational discovery research. For families to take an active role as advocates for more research and improvements in the care that their babies receive. And finally, they culminate in this sort of key recommendation around the creation of a global alliance for innovation in newborn health. A bit like the Gavi, which was created for vaccine access. It should focus on being a central hub to coordinate all of these efforts, as well as address the imbalance of research funding around different parts of the world. Now, this diagram illustrates the complex interconnected barriers in low and middle income countries. On the top left, the section around culture and environment highlights the higher disease burden in those settings that diverts resources to immediate care and away from research activities. There's, of course, conflict and disasters that create additional instability, as well as limited protected time for research means that clinicians focus on service delivery. On the right-hand side, we see discussion around medical needs and technical limitations, so distinguishing between what's needed, so the medical needs, versus what's technically feasible, so the limitations, acknowledging that basic needs like thermal control, oxygen monitoring, caffeine, antimicrobial stewardship all remain unmet in many parts of the world. And even when interventions do exist, their efficacy in low-middle income settings is actually really uncertain. I mean, therapeutic hypothermia is a recent important example. They also encourage training, including essential equipment maintenance, and we know that there are many groups like Nest 360 working on that. Workforce and infrastructure challenges. So skilled workforce shortage affects both the care delivery and the research capacity. There are limitations around management, both at the individual hospital level as well as regional and national levels. Data systems can be inadequate, limiting quality improvement work. And this can also create this sort of dependency on external players, external researchers, who may not deeply understand or prioritize what the local leaders know are the priorities for their populations and their contexts. And the structure of this figure actually allows us to sort of see how these four categories feed into the central problem, that this isn't just about a lack of resources, it's really about the interconnected systemic challenges. So while the Commission is really a welcome step, it's not without its critiques. So two commentaries highlight that a significant portion of the gap lies not in research and discovery in terms of drugs and technology or innovation, but actually the science of how to deliver care better. So this involves understanding the local barriers to care, creating sustainable health system improvements, fostering local leadership that can adapt solutions to suit their specific cultural and economic context. And the Commission report instead has a greater emphasis on a top-down discovery and technology-focused approach. And as I read it, I sort of thought the report is better conceptualized as not just the future of neonatology, but perhaps the future of neonatal research and innovation. And furthermore, there's an argument from the commentaries that neonatology must really also empower and develop the wider clinical team that cares for infants and families. Now, neonatal nurses are the largest workforce in neonatal care, alongside the allied health professionals. Their education and professional development should be prioritized and allow them to lead neonatal research as well. Now, as we reviewed the article, we had some thoughts about some additional potential limitations. We found that the Commission report is actually not available open access. And this really creates a barrier, particularly to industry, policymakers, regulatory boards, as well as some or many in low and middle income countries, thus actually limiting the report's reach and impact amongst the very audience it aims to target. There's a limited focus on specific groups where there are important disparities in outcomes, for example, gender, ethnicity, including indigenous populations, disabilities, rural versus urban. And the argument can be made that true sustainable progress will really come from this sort of idea of a dignity-based practice that centers on local knowledge, respects community values, and empowers local leaders to design their own health solutions. Now, considering how neonatal care intersects with other major global health trends, the report doesn't really address critical immediate threats posed by both climate change and antimicrobial resistance. And there's limited discussion around both the opportunities and threats that come with the new world that is going to be driven by artificial intelligence. So, to sum up, this all sounds very big and global, but what does it actually mean for us as an individual? It's really it's a validation of the work that we do every day, but a call for us to be part of the solution. We have a crucial role to play in not only implementing the best care, but also in advocating for our patients and families, recognizing that neonatology or the future of neonatology doesn't just sit with those in a lab or conducting high-level science or research. It's really in all of our hands, in our clinics and in our collective voices. But overall, we really wanted to congratulate the commissioners for a huge amount of work, as well as the co-authors and advisors to produce this sort of powerful and timely report that will hopefully drive meaningful progress in newborn care. That's it from me. I will hand over to Brett.
Thanks, Shiraz, for such a wonderful summary of the Commission. Now, hopefully that's got the juices flowing and there's going to be lots of questions. Loving what's coming through in the chat so far. Hello to Ronald Achoki from Nairobi. Thanks so much for joining us. And I see Alex has added a comment as well. But please put your questions in the chat. We're going to be able to discuss as many of them as we can at the end of this session today with our international panel. Now, one of the things that we've really enjoyed doing in our two global neonatal journal clubs so far is the opportunity to interview the authors or the main investigators of the studies or papers that we are reviewing. And we've had that opportunity again. In a minute, you'll see the interview with Daniele De Luca and Steve Abman. And we do this in a pre-recorded way such that we get to hear their voice and hopefully put forward some interesting questions to them. But also, they're not part of the main discussion so that we can have an open discussion amongst ourselves as well. So in a second, you're going to hear from Daniele De Luca from Paris, France. He's a neonatologist and professor of pediatrics and head of pediatrics and critical care at the Paris-Saclay University, and he was first author of this commission. His hospital is one of the main perinatal centres in France, and you've probably heard his name. His research focuses on respiratory critical care. He was one of the first to introduce lung ultrasound to the NICU and many other things. You'll also hear from Professor Steve Abman from Denver, Colorado. He's a pulmonologist, not a neonatologist, but he's a professor of pediatrics and he's also the professor of pediatrics and director of the Pediatric Heart-Lung Center in Colorado at the University of Colorado and the Children's Hospital of Colorado. And his research has included translational research in neonatal lung injury, vascular development, pulmonary hypertension, and BPD, and is one of the world's most respected voices on those fields. So I'll throw to that now, and we will see you after the interview. Danny, I'm going to kick off with you as the lead author of the Commission. I'd love to know a little bit about how the Commission came about. We were reading that it was really catalysed by the halting or the ceasing of a trial for a therapy specifically designed for bronchopulmonary dysplasia. And we've all experienced that frustration at the lack of specific therapies for neonatal care. Could you tell us a little bit about how that sort of got things going and how it led to the central arguments that are presented in the Commission?
Yeah, sure. I remember very well that day. We were shocked, not just because we don't have any therapy for BPD, we know that, but because one of the few therapies maybe promising that was being trialed at that time was stopped, and the trial was somehow halted for financial reasons and so on. And started a discussion with Stephen and many other friends and KOL. And we were like, it can be happening. It can be happening. And so we took, I would say, some time under the guidance of the wonderful editorship at Lancet Child Health in order to convey our anger, if you want, our shock into something more useful, into trying to be more productive, because at the end of the day, we realized that what was happening with that trial, which, by the way, right now restarted, and we're very happy about that, and we're very much optimistic about the future of that trial. Anyway, we realized that there was just an example. There have been other examples, unfortunately, where, insufficient or anyway halted drug development, and then all the questions about the medical devices also came out. And so we realized that we had a work to be done to highlight for the people out there that we needed to do something. Otherwise, neonatology was like needing to float somewhere where we are in a sort of an inertia that we don't want to feel anymore.
Yeah, can I say this too, that I really want to make sure Daniele De Luca did such a fabulous job in highlighting these issues, bringing groups together. Seriously, Danny, mazel tov, as we say. Yes. And it really highlighted, it's more than just about the IGF-1 stuff. And it was just yet another example of neonatology's place in a bucket. And it's not being sufficiently supported at multiple levels. And it exposed so many gaps along the way that we've seen in many other centers too. Too many occasions as well. Recombinant human SOD. How could inhaled NO have happened if we relied on the adults to translate it down? If they didn't apply to the right physiology? How is it that pharmaceuticals would pull the trigger on a decision purely on a financial basis, ignoring the ethics of what it means to recruit children, sick newborns, into trials, and then to walk away because the profit margin isn't there, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can see how this snowballed into this large effort, 3 years of work, 100 commissioners about, I think, Danny, right? And but I think there's a lot of meat there, and it was really a wonderful experience, and we hope that people like the product. Yeah.
Well, we certainly do, Danny and Steve. And Steve, that leads really nicely into a quote from the Commission, which was that we should be prioritising patients' best interests rather than patient protection. So just elaborate a little bit on that statement.
Yes, and now it doesn't mean that anything goes. It doesn't mean that we don't need any kind of background with good preclinical work and the thoughtful role for a given intervention based on the clinical timing and course and endpoints and things like that. But it means that we've overdone it. It's become an excuse in some ways that we wait too long, we're too worried, and what we do is we turn the table ethically in the other direction. That suddenly neonates don't have the right to learn, that we can learn more about how to optimize their outcomes, because we spilled so much into protecting them that we've overdone it. And so it's not an either or scenario, but let's streamline the process, be smart about it. And at the end of the day, we still have a job to do in terms of improving outcomes with innovative therapies and devices. And Danny, I'll let you grow on this as well.
Yeah, I think Stephen said it all. The problem is that to protect them, we did too much, and at the same time, we ended up in doing not enough. And the proof of that is that there are still a number of diseases and disorders that are untreatable. Sometimes we don't even have diagnostic criteria or tools. I'll give you another example. It's a little bit more provocative. In France, the so-called IRB are called Comité pour la protection des personnes, meaning committee who are supposed to protect people from whom? From physicians, from nurses, or from the disease. I had the impression that particularly for neonates that actually do not speak up, we're protecting them from the innovation or from people. We are the nasty one, by the way, sure. But we are not protecting them from the diseases that are still untreatable.
Oh, very wise words from you both. And Danny, you proposed the creation of the Global Alliance for Innovation in Newborn Health. And the proposal there is that would address the lack of a predictable market for neonatal products. And I just am interested, what work has already happened since the Commission, and how do you see bringing together such an alliance? Like, how are you going to do that?
So first of all, I really want to give the credit to who deserve it, because the whole idea of this global alliance is Nina Mod is one, another senior author that everybody knows. Ciao Nina, if you're there. And the idea is very smart, I guess, because since it's in the fact that nobody can realize that all alone in his country or in his region or in his continent, because at the end of the day, as you said, the market is not big enough, not like for cardiology or any other disciplines in the adult medicine. We need to join forces. We need to join forces as much as we can, at least in countries that want to collaborate between them. Now, it's something that is not easy for sure, but it's my understanding that there are already some examples in this direction. For example, for the Global Alliance for vaccine implementation. I know that's a hot topic right now, but this is something that's been already done. And even without thinking about the pandemics, but if we think about what is happening with flu every year, there's clearly a connection, there's clearly an alliance all over the world. Now, what we're going to try to do right now, and also thanks to you, is that after the publication of the Lancet Commission document, the Lancet editorship has pushed us to create a sort of a roadmap in order to bring the message in several, I would say, environments. So, for example, like with your initiative, or for example, by organizing physical events. We're doing one in Paris, another one in Rome. There will be a talk in Washington, D.C. at the hot topics and so on, in order to have all these people together and hopefully have everybody understand that we need to join forces, particularly with the authorities, with the industry for sure, but with the authorities, governments, and the IRB. I can also disclose that just received an email, and we will have a meeting with the European Commission on Healthcare about the topics of the Lancet Commission. So that's the first step, together with an official governmental body, in order to make things real.
You're very aspirational, and we wish you all the best, and we'll do whatever we can to help there. Steve, we've talked so far about innovation in neonatal care, and there's a few commentaries and editorials around the Commission. I was an author on one of them as well. One of the commentaries sort of points out that if we have this emphasis on new R&D, that it can just overshadow the really pressing need to translate things that we already know work, high impact interventions, into routine care. And a lot of our audience today and live audience will be from working in low and middle income countries. What do you have to say about that balance between new innovation and what we already know?
I think that you've hit it on the head of some very important things that we could already be doing, especially with some of the more severe diseases, critically ill newborns, especially with the establishments of chronic disorders, whether it's lung, heart, brain, all of those things. We could do more together. We could do more together by working as teams at the bedside, by training our younger folks, and even our current members of neonatology and associated fields to share ideas together, to be willing to understand the physiology in greater depth, to really toss out ideas of what might be the optimal strategy to use to together see what the responsiveness is like and how to move forward. In other words, the idea of team bedside care, I think, is vital. Thinking physiologically and being trained to apply physiology, to be trained to think about therapies that address that changing physiology across the time course of the disease's evolution. These are all things that we could do a much better job at, even with the tools at hand. Even without that novel drug, we could do better. And I think the outcomes can be improved along those lines. And then we could better identify for novel agents that are there, where are the gaps? To whom would we apply this innovative therapy? And what would success look like? And it's together having those ideas with more complexity than the simple algorithmic way that we teach disease. You have this, you do that. If you don't have that, you could alternatively do something else. And we need to understand the complexity and the interactions between organs and the nature that disease changes with time. And so a lot could be done at the bedside already. We should be already applying these principles to how we train the next generation of neonatologists and others. And that'll set the stage for better, more successful clinical trials. That is, through physiologic phenotyping and developing a greater understanding without necessarily having that new therapy in hand yet. That'll already set the stage for improving outcomes, I think.
Both. And Danny, I'm really interested, this was a huge body of work, this commission. I think there were something like 100 international experts involved from all over the world. I'm interested to know from you, what was the most difficult part of having so many different voices involved in the commission, and what was the really rewarding part of having so many different voices involved?
Well, starting from the bottom, obviously the rewarding part is that finally we made it, and it has been done, and we're here discussing about that and diffusing it all over the world. Obviously, there were different opinions because 30 commissioners, another 70 advisors, and so on. But that's normal. I mean, that's life, and neonatology is complex, and we needed all the possible different opinion from different healthcare professionals. I think that the most difficult part was representing by, I would say, the time over which we spend work, because, it's a 3-year work, right? So sometimes we needed to get over the paper or do another meeting or change a figure or a concept or vote on something, while the very last time we discussed it about that was like 1 year before. And so obviously you don't remember very well what happened, and you needed to start it over again and to discuss with everything, and you don't want to do what you already did. So it's tricky, because usually we're physicians, we're healthcare professionals anyway, so we're much quicker than that. But then it was mandatory. I mean, that's the way Lancet Commission works, and it was tough. I don't know what you think about that, Stephen, but sometimes that was the toughest part.
It was tough, but the whole thing, though, I love when people have new ideas. I love when people disagree with me. And those discussions, I grow by them. We learn together. And it was so great to have people had slightly different backgrounds and different things. Folks who were really masters of clinical trials, those who really loved QI approaches, those who really had some experience with regulatory, those who are already strong advocates. And so to bring that mixture of backgrounds together, that's why you can nuance it a certain way that really together has a different kind of message than if we stayed in our own path alone. And so to me, it was that richness of diversity that we had. And a lot of creative thinking went into it. And I learned a tremendous amount. And, I thought it was good. Yeah. The other piece too is the advocacy piece that I learned so much from, and that we're all appreciating that, you save a life in the NICU, it's a lifelong impact. How we could improve or reduce the morbidities, how we could intervene early. We could affect a whole lifetime. and the disability metrics that are used in public health or World Health studies, we should be applying that to neonatology more strongly, vigorously, because it aids our advocacy and it heightens public awareness that it's not just something, once you're out of the NICU, you're fine. No, these are lifelong issues, and they have impact on the social nature, the economic issues, you name it, the health issues, of course, quality of life, and that has a ripple effect that's so meaningful. And I think to me, that was one of the biggest messages that came out of our work, was to think about disease or health across the lifespan, that intervention early makes such a huge difference, and that our government politicians need to know it, our government agencies need to know it. We need to publicize this. The public needs to be behind us. And I think that's the kind of language that I think people don't consider outside of neonatology sometimes.
Well, yeah, I think that's very much important, because our patients are the only ones with these characteristics. They have a long life ahead. They will be the citizens of tomorrow for like decades. So, and this is a strong message for politicians, for agencies and so on. And we didn't highlight that enough so far. Stephen is right.
Well, that's a great place to leave it. We're lucky to work in this specialty. It's an amazing field, but we've got a long way to go. And thanks to the Commission, your work on the Commission, all the people that contributed, we're talking about that today. So to Danny and Steve, thanks again so much for being part of our Global Neonatal Journal Club. Thanks again. Danny.
Okay, hi everyone. My turn now. So if I could ask the panelists to unmask themselves and unmute themselves, and we'll introduce you. Thank you so much for joining. I know it's all weird times all over the world from wherever you're from. So maybe I'll just start introducing you, and I'll ask you a little secret question. So first off, we have Professor Tran from Da Nang Hospital. If you just say hi, you're the Deputy Director and the Vice Chairman of the Vietnam Perinatal and Neonatal Association, and also a member of the Independent Review Group of the Western Pacific Region Office for the implementation of an action plan for healthy newborns. Thank you very much, Professor Tran, for joining us. Then we have Professor Aarti Maria from New Delhi in India, whose research interest is in family-centered care. Thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Mr. Patrick Teo, who is the chair of the Association of African Neonatal Nurses. Patrick, thank you for joining us. Next up on my list, we have Ms. Tendi Mutema, who is the family lead for the African Neonatal Network, calling all the way from Zimbabwe, as is Dr. Alex Stevenson, who is co-PI of the African Neonatal Network from Harare. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Tendi. So I was part of Group 5 that was led by Professor Kutsuda from Japan. And although the first push for this commission was for R&D, what it rapidly emerged was that there was a lot of inequity in neonatology or newborn care around the world. I was very much struck by a comment from one of our advisors from Burma, who said that our main aim is to stay alive and not keep alive. That reverberated, and with that comment, I would ask our panelists, what do you think is the most important issue for newborn care, not neonatology, which is very ICU focused? Alex said here to look up the term neonatology. What is the main issue for newborn care do you consider in your part of the world and your area of expertise? So who wants to take that first? Maybe we'll start off with first on my panel, Alex.
Right. And I'll have a lot to say. The biggest problem where I work is probably the same as everywhere, as where you work. It's money. And there's never enough money, but it's impossible. But as you come further down the income stream, it has more and more consequences. And I think underneath that issue of money, that's actually only the face of it. I think underneath that, there is a more profound issue, which is also universal, and that's human rights. And I think we hear that in this report, and I heard it from Stephen talking about the bucket of neonatology, that the bottom line, no matter what people try and say, is that different lives have different values. And it's a power issue. The people who control the money decide where and how it should be spent. And I think that's the main problem where I work, and I suspect the same in most places.
And maybe before we move on to someone else, Alex, there's a question from Melissa Weber here, who says, do you think the global falling birth rate will influence policymakers in their funding for future newborn research?
Oh, Melissa, that is a very important question. And also a very sensitive question, because there's a granularity in there that's very important. There is a global falling birth rate, but it's much more marked, the difference between low income and high income. The future of neonatology is African, and that's because the future of humanity is African, and that is because by 2050, over half the babies in the world are going to be born in Africa. And so whilst I don't have an answer to Melissa's question, and I think it's really important, what's even more important for humanity as a whole is how we deal with this horrendous inequity and how are we going to, I hear that, a lot of rich countries have pronatal policies. France, I think, spends over $2 million for every extra baby that is born from their pronatal policies. And yet here in Africa, I regularly see babies die for lack of $5. And how humanity deals with that is going to have profound effects on the future of humanity. And I'll end by misquoting Oscar Wilde to say that if this is the way that humanity treats its future, it doesn't deserve to have one.
Thank you, Alex. Maybe we'll move on next to Arti Maria. Dr. Arti, what do you think of the question? What is the most important newborn care issue from where you are?
Thanks for the invitation and to be a part of this panel. It's a great honor. So yes, I feel the biggest problem here is, as already Alex said, it's inequities and the differences in quality. And I think we're not able to deliver the quality that we aspire. I don't even aspire yet for innovations as the end point or technology or, I feel that basically we need to have our minimum basic standards, and we want to be ensuring that, innovation doesn't really leapfrog the basics. So I really wish that we can actually deliver the care that every basic newborn and everywhere should be able to get a respectful newborn care, which I think we are far from. And that experience of care, if we need to improve, we really need to get down to basics again. And of course, the inequities are wide and disparate, and that again, it's a road. And it's not that what we need to do, we don't know. We really know a lot about what works, and especially in the resource constrained, countries and settings. But what we don't know yet is how it works, the implementation research. And therefore, there is a real need of, implementation, which is science of delivery. So what works? What are the barriers? What really, where we need to invest is actually there. I think the investment should be in the implementation.
Thank you, Dr. Arti.
It's like saying the R&D and investment in this is like inventing an airplane. But if we don't build the red runway and we don't have the trained pilots, I think we won't be able to fly the planes. And therefore, we need to have implementation parity with innovation.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. All right. For the interest of time, we might move on to Dr. Tran, who's next on my panel. Dr. Tran, what are your thoughts about this issue?
Yes, I totally agree with RT. In our setting, we think that the basic care for the newborn right after birth should be implemented well and increase the coverage of early essential newborn care. So every baby who arrives should have a skin-to-skin contact and breastfeeding, which is, globally still very low coverage. Now, breastfeeding rates, even in our setting, less than 50% in the first 6 months of life. So every care for the newborn and the mother should be focused on this basic. Need to rearrange the staff allocation wisely on the staff in the condition of the limited resource of human staff, then we need to rearrange our staff to get the basic care. And the kangaroo mother care for preterm newborn need also be enhanced because less than 20% of preterm newborn receive kangaroo mother care in our setting. So these things, I think early essential newborn care, kangaroo mother care, breastfeeding need to be improved in the region so that every newborn had the good stock in life, and that reduces significantly mortality and morbidity. And the second one, we thought about the drug and equipment, but just basic drug and equipment in the essential list of the WHO should be widely used in our setting. Let's say, the CPAP machine or even basic ventilator is very, very high price. So, the CPAP machine, 5 times of monthly salary of doctors or 10 times of that. It's difficult to equip in our setting to provide for respiratory distress babies right after birth. So I think basic equipment need to be have to be available in our setting with reasonable price and with good quality. So these are something I thought that important to our setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tran. So we might move on to Patrick, who's a nurse. And as you know, the nurses are the backbone of any nursery. So Patrick, what are your thoughts about this issue?
So thank you so much. We are all aware that neonatal nurses are the largest workforce caring for newborns across the globe. Yet they are overlooked most of the time, and especially in terms of research. So neonatal nurses should be incorporated in research so that through empowerment, not only to provide care, but to lead in research and policies. They should also be fully recognized as neonatal nurse specialists. So just to add on what my colleagues have said, the challenges that we are still facing, despite to date, is limited access to quality care. We still have the basic neonatal equipment still missing within our facilities. And this includes essential medicines like caffeine citrate and surfactant, which have been proven to be more useful. And to date, some facilities within the low and middle income facilities are not able to acquire and get for use for the newborn. We also have a shortage, and especially in terms of nursing in our newborn care facilities. So the shortage of neonatal nurses and specialists is still cutting across. And so nurses are often overstretched and supported, leading to burnouts within the facilities. And it is not always recognized, and neonatal nursing is also, in some parts, is also not recognized as a specialty, limiting investment in training and career development. So there's need to look into training and ensure that more neonatal nurses are trained and recognized wherever they are working within the globe. And my third and last point is the weak implementation of the proven interventions. We know the importance of kangaroo mother care, and the the importance of early and exclusive breastfeeding, but these practices have not been scaled up to ensure that they provide the improvement in supporting in reducing neonatal mortality. So if these interventions are actually scaled up in terms of through training and ensuring that the practice is actually carried out within our units, we are able to mitigate and ensure that our newborns are well taken care of. Healthcare systems, whereby we still have, like in our facilities, we still have poor referral systems, which leads to delay in critical care and weak data systems. Therefore, we are unable to get important information to generate research ideas that are able to take care and support the quality of care of our newborns. So those are my few inputs, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And we finally have Tendi, who represents the parents. So Tendi, would you be able to share us your thoughts on this issue? What is most important for newborn care?
Okay, thank you so much for having me here. And as a parent to two babies who required a prolonged hospital stay, and after working with so many families who have small or sick newborn babies, one thing that I really would emphasize on is the inclusion of the parent and family in the care of the newborn. And as the Commission mentions, that there is need to follow up on the children, on the babies. So if we have babies, right, who are going home sick, or maybe who have been sick, for example, maybe it's jaundice, it has affected their well-being, maybe it's prolonged stay on oxygen and their vision has been affected, retinopathy of prematurity, it is the families that take these babies home. And a baby who is not well at home means families that are not well at home. We have to look at the impact that taking home a child, probably with disability or with a certain condition that could have been prevented, the effects goes to the family. And the family effects comes back to our community, our societies, and our countries. So how can we save the mental state of everyone? We save them by prioritizing newborn babies, because the newborn baby will grow and they'll become the adult. And I know I was reading the Commission, and they say that much of the money is channeled to adult health care, which of course makes you wonder, is it not better to start with the newborn babies than tackle a problem that may have been prevented, perhaps even during pregnancy, during the newborn stage or whatever stage? It makes more sense to save the baby and not have to save the family. And the other thing I would say is it is important to consider the mental well-being of the family, because it will not make sense again to send a healthy baby home, but a traumatized mom and dad who then cannot fully take care of this baby. So we're putting a lot into saving the baby, but are we putting enough for the families, for their mental well-being and their mental state?
Thank you, Tendi. I think one of the statements that we had from our commission was that around the world, newborn lives matter less. It's just part of how we view a newborn. You know, they're less valued than a grown person. So that's something that we need to shift our mindset towards. I need to do some housekeeping before I move on to the most important person here. Could you please put your Q&As into the Q&A panel so that we can answer them? It's a bit hard to look at the webinar chat. So our final panelist is Professor Peter Davis. So Peter, as you know, is head of neonatology at Royal Women's Hospital, and he was integral to the nuts and bolts of this commission. So, Peter, if you could tell us how you corralled all of us crazy people together, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Julie, and it's really quite humbling. I think all of us in Australia are feeling that way to share this discussion with people who are actually making a big difference around the world, and we look and learn from you. Look, I was really lucky. My group was the one that was in charge of improving collaboration, so it was a really interesting group. Included those with lived experience. We had parents of NICU babies. Often they'd gone on to leadership roles in advocacy groups around the world. We had graduates of NICU like Louise Pallet, one of our local graduates. We had nurses like Agnes van der Hoogen from the Netherlands, a richness of input there. And people from outside neonatology, and a big shout out to Heidi Flory, a paediatrician from the US, sort of representing fields that were more developed than we are, and introducing topics that we're just really only starting to come to grips with, like subphenotypes and endotypes, things that might lead us to provide better focused, individualised care. Look, about the process, Steve made some great points. It's obvious he's a real optimist. He's somebody who learns from disagreement. He finds that enriching, and I think what we all do is quite true, but you'd have to acknowledge that this is a really complicated process. You've put together 100 very intelligent, forthright, opinionated leaders in their field, and then try and capture all their voices, the soft ones as well as the loud ones. And of course, some great ideas didn't make it to the final version. Now, the final product isn't perfect, but I think Brett said this. We're very lucky to do what we do. We've got a good story to tell. We're a relatively young subspecialty. We've learned some tough lessons. We're trying to do better. I really loved Artie's words in her commentary. We're advocating for the citizens of the future, and hopefully the Commission gives us some ammunition to do that, all of us, families, clinicians, researchers, administrators, ammunition to fight for, and again, using Artie's words, smarter and kinder care to all our babies.
Thank you very much, Peter. We are 1 minute to time, so maybe I'll pass it back on to Brett.
Thank you, Julie, and thanks to the panelists. To be honest, I'm a little bit speechless, and Peter used the word humbled, and that's how I feel right now. We are only a minute from time. We'll probably go a few minutes over, to be honest. We're going to throw now to something a little bit different. As part of this process, we also interviewed the Associate Editor at Lancet Child Adolescent Health, Ali Landman. And so I'm going to throw to an interview with her now. Whoops, I hope. Hang on a sec, technical difficulties. Stop share. There we go, and we'll join you back again afterwards. So the panelists, if you'd like to switch off, we'll watch the video together. Danny, I'm going to... Well, Ali, thanks so much for joining us at Global Neonatal Journal Club. It's really interesting to get a totally different perspective on the commission that we've been talking about today. We've had some authors with us, Daniele De Luca and Steve Abman, and we'll be discussing the commission at length with our panel shortly. But we wanted to get your insights. Ali, you have a PhD, but you're the acting deputy editor for Lancet Child Adolescent Health at the moment. Your usual day job is as deputy editor of Lancet Oncology, but you've been there for the end of the commission for the last 12 months or so across what's a pretty long 3-year process. The first question to you really is, how do these sorts of commissions come about, and how does the journal decide how to prioritise them?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. So commissions kind of originate organically, and it's usually through a discussion between the authors who have an idea about an intractable problem, something that's really big in the field that's preventing it from moving forward, or they have an idea of a total, perspective shift on a field. And then there's a number of discussions between those authors and the editors. There's usually a lot of meetings and a lot of outlines drawn up. And once there's agreement, the commissioners and the authors move forward. And, it's not, you asked about how do we prioritize commissions? We don't get that many ideas coming to us because they're so big. They're such a massive undertaking that takes so many years, like you say, 3, sometimes 5 years. Often when it comes to us, it's already quite a good idea that we can shape.
Oh, thanks. That's really interesting. And just seeing the Commission on the Future of Neonatology come about, it's been an interesting process looking from afar. The big question we really want to get you to think about today is this divide between a journal like Lancet Child Adolescent Health acting as a disseminator of research that is brought to you and has results and you edit it and publish it, versus actually being in that advocacy role of an active driver of policy and practice change and advocating for, in this case, children and adolescents in a way that you think is important. So can you tell us a little bit about how the journal sits in that space?
Sure. Thanks for asking that. I think at all the Lancet journals, it's really important that the research that we publish that's not the end of it. Oh, we've published it and we can move on. The idea is that each publication, and especially a commission, is the beginning of a conversation. And I think that we can, as a journal, have a role in not just disseminating that, which I think is a traditional role for a journal, disseminating the research or disseminating the ideas, but also acting to help make a change on the basis of those results, because results out there are just results. We all know that there's tons of research. I was just reading an article about how there's something like 600 prognostic markers for, different leukemias. And how is a clinician going to choose between those? So it's the idea of really, finding a way to find the best science and then say, this is how we're going to implement it. This is how we're going to get people to buy into it. And also, if there are problems with it, how are we going to do further research to refine it? And I think that the journal has an important role there because we've worked with the authors to refine their paper, ensure that it's telling the best message that it can. We've worked hard to make sure that we're publishing the best science, which means the most rigorous science and the most practice-changing science. And I think the Lancet has a unique position because we're all in-house professional editors. This is our full-time job. So we have the space to do it. We have the expertise. We all have research backgrounds or medical backgrounds to do it. We care very passionately about it. And we're totally independent. So we're not associated with any societies. We don't have any vested interests. We're doing this really just to help the academic community, the clinical community, to take their findings and really make them change practice or change policy in their areas.
Oh, Ellie, that was a brilliant explanation, and thanks so much. This is a little bit different having an editor along to be part of a session like this, but we really appreciate that unique perspective, and I'm sure we're going to get lots of discussion about it. So thanks so much for coming along to Global Neonatal Journal Club.
Jessica, thanks so much for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that unique perspective from Ellie Landman, and thanks so much to Ellie for agreeing to be part of this. If I can get all the panelists and Shiraz and Julie to turn your videos back on. If you might allow me just to summarise where things are at the moment. We've had an amazing discussion about money and equity. We've heard about infant mental health, about families and family-centred care. And Tendai and Patrick, your answers and discussions have really generated a lot of impact in the chat. So thank you for those. We've heard about low cost effective interventions, but how hard it seems to be to get them where they need to go. We've in the chat had people raise about new technologies. How do we keep up with new technologies and ensure that they're being used effectively? And we've also had the old issue of tinier and tinier babies that are being resuscitated in high-income countries and where that fits in all of this. Now, I know we're 6 minutes past 6, but we've still got over 200 people online and this incredible panel. So I do just want to open it up. Is there anyone that would like to add a comment about anything that we've just talked about today? Maybe Julie, would you get the ball rolling? Have you got anything you'd like to add? And then we'll see if the panelists want to raise their hands.
Yes, I think, look, having had the opportunity to work with Group 5, who had feedback from all the lower resource regions, it really opened up my eyes about what the differences in resources that we're giving the babies around the world. I think there is a comment from one of our attendees about whether we are going to be talking about the 23-weeker. Victoria says, are we going to be talking about the 23-weeker and the mortality and morbidity rates? And on the other hand, we've got people concerned with the survival of a full-term child. I think we need to come to a happy medium and work towards a way that we can use what we have to improve outcomes for the future. So there is a lot of work to be done, but I think what Patrick said is also very important. Increase the voice of the nurses, allow opportunities for other players in this act to be able to voice their needs.
Thanks, Julie. That's very nicely and succinctly put. Artie, did you have your hand up briefly there? Would you like to unmute and say something?
Yes. I just want to summarize saying that while the commission piece was very, very pertinent and very contextual to the modern day, it has basically focused on innovation, resources, and collaboration. But my commentary was all about, three more anchors which make it even stronger and maybe more complete. And that was mainly about the implementation science, which bridges discovery to delivery gap. Number 2 was the family partnerships, the rights-based approach, which is going to be the key for delivering the, respectful newborn and maternal care. And in that, and the family care, and actually the nurturing care for small and sick newborn, which actually gives an experience of care similar to that in womb to the newborn baby. And we've developed a model of nurturing care, which really mimics that. And it is based on the WHO framework of nurturing care. And we've developed audio video modules, and we are implementing that and testing it and piloting and doing the implementation work on that. And the third part is the third anchor to this is about the operationalization of equity. And for that, I think we need to see that how we need to close the foundational gaps everywhere, where especially the LMICs, the systems gap, the systems need to be ready first and the technology next. And we need to adopt a value-based neonatology approach in which we used to take the help of, we need to take help of health technology assessment methods to prioritize the high impact interventions and the cost-effective interventions, because they are not being implemented to scale. And I think we need to do those things first. And of course, the LMICs need to have a stronger voice. They need to be stronger partners and active partners and not just passive recipients. They need to be partnering. And as I think Tendai had said very nicely, families and parents need to have a voice. They cannot be ignored. They are very much equal stakeholders and partners in care. And that is why we need to prioritize interventions which are rooted in nurturing care and family-centered care. I'll end with that. And therefore, I just end with saying that future of neonatology lies in combining the power of science with the strength of systems and the soul of human connection. I'd like to end. Thank you.
Amazing, Artie. Thank you. There's a lot going on in the chat. Alex, you're doing an amazing job of answering all the questions. I don't quite know how you do it, but I love your way with words, Alex, and we might, at the risk of getting some more Oscar Wilde, do you want to just unmute and tell us a little bit about what you just wrote in the chat about the greatest good and the balance between, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, it's a philosophical debate that we've been having at least since ancient Greece and probably before that. Like, the balance between the community and the individuals. The utilitarians said we should be aiming for the greatest good for the greatest number. And we're hearing that in the paper, that, you know, the pendulum has swung too much to protecting the individual's rights at all costs, and that's actually stifling progress across the field. But, you know, there's always the other side of the coin. And I don't know if in this paper, if there were regulatory folks or people from ethics board, and if they were probably in the quiet camp, because I definitely heard in this paper, like, we should be considering the greater good more than the individual rights. And it's a complex field, like doing research on very vulnerable babies at the time they're born, when, you know, resuscitation research, when they're most sick, without permission. I believe in it. I would support it, but I can understand why it's contentious and why it may cause future issues in trust in the profession.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks so much for that. Shiraz?
I was just reflecting. I was just reflecting on Tendai's really thoughtful comments around the health of the family unit as part of society, particularly following discharge home. And I think that sort of extends the comments that we've had online around infant mental health and family-centered care within the NICU to beyond the NICU, into the environment in which the child is being discharged. And in different settings, you know, just being in hospital for weeks with loss of income from work days, needing to pay for aspects of care, can have a huge burden on the family's, not just mental health, but, you know, ability to keep the family unit afloat. And there's actually so little data on post-discharge outcomes for babies in resource-limited settings. And we might think we've done a great job by getting this baby alive and home, but the baby might be discharged home weighing 1.5 kilos into a family unit that can't support them and all the other children, all the other demands. And I think that's just one little area that you made me think about, Tendai, and I think perhaps a little blind spot for us as a community.
Thank you, Shiraz. Nicely put. Now, we had complaints last time for going too long, and here we are again at 75 minutes. We're going to have to wrap this up. Honestly, we could keep talking for another hour. There's more questions coming through on the chat about different topics. There's people from high-income countries asking other questions on entirely different topics. We just can't cover it all. Thank you so much for coming. There's still hundreds of people online to the bitter end, and we really appreciate you joining us. To the panelists, really, it's been incredible having you. Artie, Huang, Tendai, Alex, Patrick, Peter. I remembered you, Peter. And thank you so much for coming. And of course, from your hosts, Shiraz, Julie, and I, thanks very much. It's been a little bit different this time reviewing the Commission. We'll probably get back to research papers and new studies in coming versions of this, but it's been an amazing session, and we wish you well, and goodbye from all of us.